Well, kia ora te whānau, and welcome to this service, which is a little different to what you are normally used to, a little different to what I'm normally used to as well. But perhaps it brings back some memories from our time in lockdown. I've had a heavy cold for a couple of days, and I'm doing what the government is telling us to do, that if we're not well, to stay at home. And that's a message that we've been giving us to you as a church as well. If you're not well, stay at home. And so this morning I wanted to speak with you, and I've got a message to share with you, but I need to do it from home. We've been taking a break from our #Blessed series for 3 Sundays as we had our self-denial mission focus, but this morning we're coming back to our focus on #Blessed and looking at these opening statements from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, that famous sermon. And of course, we've already seen the stunning introduction to his sermon where 8 times he makes these statements about what the blessed life looks like. And this morning we're coming to the third of these blessed statements. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Or as another translation says, God blesses those who are gentle and humble. The earth will belong to them. When I was a child, perhaps just 3 or 4 years old, my mother taught me a prayer. It was a prayer that I would say every night at bedtime. Perhaps some of you learned this prayer as well. This is how it went. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon this little child. Do you remember that prayer? Gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon this little child. It might surprise you to know that this is actually the opening verse of an old Charles Wesley hymn, which went like this. It went, gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon a little child, pity my simplicity, suffer me to come to thee. Well, this was the first line of the prayer that my mother taught me. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. The second part my mother taught me went on to say, God bless my mummy and daddy. God bless my sisters. I wasn't so sure about that one. And the final part of it was, help me be a good boy. I'm not sure that final part of the prayer ever got answered. But it's the first line that I want to think about this morning. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild. I wonder what image that brings to mind for you as you think about God. Gentle, meek, mild. They're not exactly words that we would associate with someone powerful and strong. They're not words we would normally associate with a leader or someone we look up to. Gentle, meek, mild. In fact, when we hear those words, we're more likely to think of someone uninspiring, someone with no confidence or strength of character, a submissive or ineffective person. None of us, I suspect, would likely use this word meek or gentle as one of our character attributes on our CVs. This word, like many in our English language, has changed its meaning over the years. Today we're more likely to associate the word meek with weak. It's unfortunate that those two words rhyme in the English language and they've become very much associated with each other, meek and weak. And yet here in this statement that Jesus makes about who it is that are blessed, he says, blessed are the meek. So what are we to make of this? As we think about this characteristic of meekness, I want to take you to a passage this morning in the Old Testament, in the book of Isaiah. In Isaiah 40, we read some verses that tell us a little bit about what God is like. And it speaks about how great and powerful God is. We've sung about this already this morning, haven't we? How great is our God. Isaiah 40 gives us this picture of God as our creator who holds the power of the universe in his hands. Over and over through Isaiah 40 we get this wonderful picture of the power of our creator God. And no more so than in verse 26 where it says, look up at the sky. Who created the stars you see? The one who leads them out like an army. He knows how many there are and he calls each one by name. Isn't that an amazing description of the power of our God? How great is our God? Or sometimes we sing, how great thou art. What an amazing, powerful Creator God we have. Isaiah says God not only created the stars, but he knows how many stars there are, and he knows them each by name. Verse 26, because of his great power and incomparable strength, not a single one is missing. Tucked away in the middle of this incredible description of God's power and strength are some other words. Words which are not describing God's power and strength, but another attribute of God. Listen to verse 11. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. This same passage that describes the magnificence and awesomeness of God's power also speaks of his gentleness, his meekness. What better illustration of this word meek or gentle than a shepherd gently carrying his lambs? So this incredibly powerful Creator God of ours, who knows every single star in every single universe by name, is meek, is gentle. And that's not the only incredible thing. Do you know what's even more incredible? The same description of God found here in Isaiah 40. Jesus uses the same word to describe himself. Listen to what he says in Matthew 11, 28 and 29. It's Jesus speaking. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." This word gentle that Jesus uses here is the same word meek that Jesus uses in that blessed statement. Jesus describes himself as meek or gentle. Meekness, you see, is a godlike characteristic. It's also one of the fruit of the Spirit. It's something that all of us should highly value and desire. Actually, there are only two men in the whole of the Bible that were ever described as meek, Moses and Jesus. And neither of them would you ever describe as effective or uninspiring or weak. In the Old Testament book of Numbers, we read about Moses, who led the great exodus of the Jews from Egypt. Numbers 12 says, "Now the man Moses was very humble," or meek is another word, "more than any man who was on the face of the earth." Paul in the New Testament urges followers of Jesus to put on the same characteristic. Listen to what he writes in Colossians 3:12. He says, "God loves you and has chosen you as his own special people. So be gentle, kind, humble, meek, and patient." And then over in Ephesians 4, he urges us to live the kind of lives that prove God has called us. He says, being completely humble and gentle. So if both Jesus and Moses were described as meek, and Paul urges Jesus' followers to be meek, then there must be something very important about this characteristic. "Learn from me," says Jesus, "for I am meek." Learn from me. How are you doing learning from Jesus? Are you learning from him? Are you understanding more of who he is and wanting to learn and become more like him? You should be. If you're a follower of Jesus, you should be wanting to learn from Jesus, becoming more like him. Learn from me, for I am meek. When Jesus really gets hold of us, when the gospel really gets hold of us, something happens. We start to become more like him. We become meek. So what is this meek? What does it mean to be meek? Well, we need to understand this word. The Greek word that Jesus uses here has a number of different meanings, and there's a number of different pictures that you can get to help you understand the meaning. One picture of this word is of a wild horse that has been tamed. You know, those Kaimanawa horses. Imagine one of those Kaimanawa horses that has been tamed, brought under control. Another picture is of the wind that was both powerful but refreshing. In every case, the idea of this word is describing power which has been brought under control. The powerful wild horse has been brought under control. The powerful wind is actually bringing refreshing. You know, in our culture, power, control, influence, strength, self-reliance are all virtues we look up to, aren't they? We look up to powerful people. We look up to strong people. We look up to people of influence. We look down on meekness and gentleness. We somehow think that meekness and gentleness is weakness. But biblical meekness is not weakness at all. In fact, it's the opposite of weakness. Biblical weakness could be summed up as power under control. Here in New Zealand, one of our main sources of power generation is, of course, our abundant source of lakes and rivers. In fact, more than 50% of our power comes from hydroelectricity. Think of the Waikato River, or the mighty Waikato as it's known. Along its 425 kilometres, there are a series of 8 dams which generate power through hydroelectric power stations. As strong and powerful as it is, this mighty Waikato is brought under control at each of these dams. It's a picture of power under control. Now compare that to the power of the tsunami. I'm sure we've all seen pictures of that terrible devastation of the March 2011 tsunami in Japan. That tsunami, that wall of water, up to 40 meters high in some places, that took out cars and ships and houses and roads, everything in its path. 20,000 plus people killed, more than 1 million buildings damaged or destroyed. Joe and I were living in Japan at that time, and we made many trips up to that region to help take relief supplies and to aid the people up there in Tohoku. I can very clearly remember the terrible devastation in those days afterwards as we drove around that area and saw vehicles, washed up on top of buildings. Cars somehow ended up in trees, upside down in the middle of rice paddies. Ships stranded far inland in the middle of the road. This wall of water which just took everything in its path. This too was power. But it was not power under control, it was power out of control. The Greek philosopher Aristotle taught that meekness was a highly desirable attribute. He described meekness as the midpoint between anger and indifference. He described it as getting angry at the right time for the right reasons in the right way. William Barclay put it like this. He said, "Blessed is the person who's always angry at the right time and never angry at the wrong time." That's a good way of thinking about it, isn't it? Blessed is the person who's always angry at the right time and never angry at the wrong time. That's meekness. In Psalm 37, David writes about meekness. In Psalm 37, verse 11, he says this, "The meek will inherit the land." Doesn't that sound familiar? The meek will inherit the land. Most scholars think that Jesus, in this sermon, echoes this verse from Psalm 37. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. In fact, this phrase, shall inherit the land or inherit the earth, occurs over and over in Psalm 37. David in this psalm shows us what the meek look like. Verse 3, he says they trust in the Lord. They do good in the face of evil. They cultivate trust. In verse 4, it says they delight themselves in the Lord. These are all pictures of the meek. Verse 7, they rest in the Lord. They wait patiently for him. And in this psalm, David also tells us what the meek do not do. Verse 1, they do not envy. Verse 8, they cease from anger and turn from wrath. Verse 27, they depart from evil. When you think about it, you realize that all of that Psalm 37 speaks about meekness is lived out in Jesus. In Matthew 26 and 27, the final hours of Jesus' life are recorded, and we read that people spat at him. They blindfolded him. They hit him in the face. They thrust a crown of thorns on his head. They put a royal robe on him and they mocked him. They spat at him and they hit him again and again. Did Jesus react? Did Jesus get angry? No. As the Apostle Peter later wrote, he said, he did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threaten revenge when he suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. What an amazing picture of what a truly meek person looks like. Listen to how Stuart Briscoe puts it. He says, the meek turn their lives, their cares, their reputations over to the Lord and let the Lord worry about it. The meek are those who, when offended, commit their wounded egos and the one offending their ego to the perfect judge. The meek can say to themselves, what they did or said to me was wrong, but they are answerable to God, so I'll let God deal with them. But I'm answerable to God too, so I'm going to concentrate on doing right by that person. The right thing might be to forgive, or confront, or both. But either way, the meek turn it all over to the Lord. I wonder if you can think of situations where you've been offended. When someone did something to you which hurt you, or someone did something very wrong to you, offended you. I wonder how you're dealing with it. Are you holding on to that as a grudge? Are you constantly feeling offended and feeling unable to let it go? The meek person can say what they did or said was wrong, but they are answerable to God, so I will let God deal with them. See, does meekness come naturally? No, it doesn't, does it? These characteristics that Jesus describes in these blessed statements are not natural human qualities. No one is naturally meek, but we become meek through the power of Jesus' gospel. Meekness is a supernatural quality. Meekness comes because you have so surrendered your life to God that He's free to demonstrate His power in you in the most difficult moments of your life. Meekness, then, is self-control based on God's control. So let me ask you this morning, how much is God in control of your life? How are you doing when it comes to pushing your way around, demanding from others, wanting your own way? How are you doing when it comes to not fighting back when you're offended? How are you doing when it comes to anger? Are you angry at the right time, for the right reasons, in the right way? When the gospel breaks into our lives, we begin to see these new signs in us. The old order is on the way out. The new order of things is on the way in. The old order of pushing and grabbing and wanting our own way is on the way out. Well, finally, what is the blessing of the meek? We get to inherit the earth. That sounds like a great inheritance, doesn't it? We get to inherit the earth. When? Well, in the end, when the earth is fully redeemed. But we also get to inherit the earth now. Who are the people really enjoying the earth? Those who grab and push and demand? No, they're too busy grabbing and pushing and demanding. Those who delight in God and delight in God's great plans are the ones who enjoy the earth and inherit it. David in the Psalm, that Psalm 37, says the earth is the Lord's and He gives it to His people. He gives it to His own people. To belong to Jesus Christ is to be granted the immense privilege of living in the palace with him, playing with his toys, and enjoying his backyard. Does meek mean weak? No backbone, no energy, no drive, no strength, no courage? No way. No way. It's through the meek that the world gets turned up, right side up. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Friends, I wonder if you'll bow your heads and join with me in this prayer. Let's pray. Jesus Christ, I need your spirit of power in my life. I need your spirit of love in my life. I need your spirit of self-control. I want to become more Christ-like. I want to learn from Jesus. I want to model my life on Jesus. When circumstances are against me, help me to endure. When people disappoint me, help me to be gentle. When people disagree with me, help me to be tender and meek. When people correct me, help me to be teachable. When people hurt me, help me to act and not to react. For I want to be more like you, Jesus. I need your spirit in my life. Amen. Rodney and our worship team are going to lead us in our final song, which is the song The Blessing. It's a song that we've learned. We've sung it here at church a couple of times, I think. We also, I'm sure many of us heard it on our recordings as we had our NBC at home services. So I wonder if you'd stand with me and we'll sing together The Blessing. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you. God bless everyone. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all next Sunday.